So we have a really full session today where we're really excited to take you on the full journey from identifying and inventorying your test automation gap to making a plan to conquer it, and then setting yourself up for future success and continuous improvement. This is Devon Jones, our presenter and test automation expert today. Devon Jones has a background in case management and education and spent a decade as a QA automation engineer before joining us as a solution architect for our low code, no code test automation tool, Ranorex. We are absolutely thrilled to have Devon on board today, and I know she's got some really great stuff queued up to cover in today's webinar. And speaking of such, I wanted to give you a little sneak preview here of the agenda of what Devon's going to be covering with everyone today. First, we're going to talk about defining the automation gap. Everyone defines it differently, but it all boils down to one cause. Once we figure out what our automation gap consists of, we'll talk about how to start tackling it. We'll review how to organize and document our work and figure out what to do first when tackling that automation gap. Then we'll go over how to maintain momentum and progress as we go through our development cycle and finish up with some tips on continuous improvement and final takeaways. So, like I said, lots of good stuff queued up for today. I don't want to waste any more time with my yapping, so with that, I will go ahead and hand it over to Devon to take you through today's amazing session. Thanks, Devon.
Thank you so much, Jesselyn. Hi, everybody. Very excited to be here. Let's talk about the test automation gap. It's a topic very near and dear to my heart. As Jesselyn went over in the agenda, before we can address something, we really need to define it. And pretty much every company I've worked for has defined their test automation gap differently. But as a QA automation engineer, I'm just going to give you my take on it. The assumption is that our test automation gap is tests that need to be written. And while that technically is the case, it's part of a larger issue, which is your tech automation gap mostly consists of tech debt. For a little bit more information on that, tech debt includes new tests to expand coverage, things that need to be automated that aren't automated yet. But it also consists of things like dirty test environments. Maybe you've got old data in your test environment, so your tests are breaking, or you have some third-party integrations that aren't set up correctly. You might have deprecated libraries. Maybe you have an old version of Chrome driver. You're behind a few versions on Node. Maybe there's some incompatibilities with the versions you have installed in other tools that you're using. You may have inefficient test design. Maybe you aren't passing in your test data the way that it should be. Your code isn't documented very well, so it's very difficult to debug. There might also be low priority development bugs that maybe make the UI transitions a little less seamless than they should be. So it's giving you a lot of timing issues. And of course, everybody's favorite, flaky tests. Google actually did a really cool blog on where flaky tests come from. And in case anybody's wondering what Google's take on it is flaky tests consists of oversized tests, things that try and test too many things at once, unstable selectors, and test data, which if you take the entirety of this, these are all of the reasons why you're having trouble addressing your automation gap. So why don't companies invest in tech debt in general? I'm sure any of you that have ever worked for a company understand that you want to get those new features out there. You want to get them out quickly. You want to give your users and your customers the features that they've been asking for. However, a lot of times this tends to get prioritized over making sure the application that you already have is working well and that it's stable. You may not be sure of the root causes of some of your issues. And as a result, you might not really know what the scope of time and effort is. If your React hooks look a little slow, you're not really sure where that's coming from, but you don't really have the time to figure out where that's coming from. It's not blocking development. You know, the developers can still put out their new features. It may be inconvenient for QA, but it's not blocking anything new, so it's not prioritized very highly. And my favorite, no customers have complained about it yet. But we really don't want to get to that point. So We need to realize the effect that tech debt actually has on our quality processes. It starts off with the test framework. It grows very unstable, unmanageable. You have quality engineers chasing false positives due to things getting skipped, selectors not being found, trying to debug tests that aren't working to figure out if they're actually bugs or not. Um, Over time, the production code quality doesn't get any better, and more bugs start getting through. As a result, test automation as a whole is seen as a waste of time, and QA is viewed as a blocker. And nobody wants to be in that situation. I can tell you personally as a QA engineer. So all of these things, even though they may not be glaringly obvious yet, all have a cumulative effect on your overall quality and your ability to address your automation gap. So where do we start, right? We've got tech debt, we have things that we need to automate. It can be a bit overwhelming, but there are definitely ways that we can get this organized so that we don't have to worry about it too much. First thing we need to do is figure out what do we have currently automated. And you need to divide those things into three different categories. You have the ones that are covering current and valid functionality, and they work. Then we have the tests that they are covering current and valid functionality, but they're not working right now. They're flaky, they need to be debugged, maybe they need to be updated, there's a slight change to your UI. And then we're going to always have those tests that they test something that no longer exists, or we're not getting the test coverage we think we're getting from that test. Or the test is just so broken, it would take more time and effort to try and debug it than it would be to just rewrite it. And my favorite, all of those tests where giant blocks of things are commented out or the entire test is commented out. So once we have our existing automation suite divided into those sections and we've deleted the ones that we no longer need, we need to figure out some way to organize and document the test cases that we currently have that are automated and working, and the test cases that are not yet automated, but we need them to be. And then also the test cases that will be automated once they're fully refactored. The easiest way to do that is to actually have some kind of templating system for your test cases. We want to make sure that you have all of the information you need for each one of these test cases. So your test cases should at minimum include the test scenario, the name or description, the feature and team ownership. If something breaks in a test case, you need to know who your point of contact is. What team is responsible for fixing this? A reference to the associated development story or bug ticket. That way, if it's tied to something that's in progress, once that ticket is resolved, you know you're clear to run that test case. If it's automated, if it's a manual test, if it's pending automation, or it might be manual only. You may just need to check over and make sure that the new colors that you're implementing in your CSS are up to date. Any preconditions, so if something needs to be set up for this test to be able to be run or to be tested, that needs to be included as well. Any test data, such as user types, forms of payment, what environment you may be testing in, and then your test steps and subsequent verifications. But you can also use things like links to your documentation, screenshots of it should look like this, what browser or device you want to test against, or any other data you may need for your test. This template is an example from TestRail. I actually used TestRail a lot when I was a QA automation engineer. It gives us the ability to be able to filter and sort by different groups and different attributes, which is very helpful when you're trying to get test cases together or do subsets of tests. Now, I get questions a lot of times when I talk about this about why do we need to document things that are already automated? And I would like to refer you to what test case documentation looks like if there is any. This is a Java doc. This is test case documentation that can be generated if you're doing, say, a Java Selenium project. This is not the easiest thing to read. If you're a non-technical stakeholder, it may be very difficult for you to figure out what is tested in this, even though it's very well documented within the code. We want test cases that are easy to read. And also, if you have non-technical stakeholders that want to see what's automated and not automated, it needs to be accessible for people. If you are struggling with writing your test cases, there are products out there that can help you with that. This is an example from DesignWise, where you can enter in different attributes such as user types or payment types or cities or countries, and it will actually generate test cases for you that can be fed into products such as TestRail or the low code, no code automation system Ranorex. Then after you have your test cases, you need to organize them into a repository. And you can organize those in whatever way makes sense for you. It can be by feature, it can be by teams. You can sort your tests into tests that you do manually, tests that are automated. Your pending automation tests can be your automation backlog. You may also want to sort them by type of test. Some people have repositories for their API tests, for their native mobile tests, for their desktop tests. It just depends on the complexity of your application and the different modes of testing that you may have. At Sembi, we actually have two different test case products. One is a very lightweight native Jira integrated system that's called X-Ray. And the other one is TestRail, which is kind of our test case repository, like powerhouse that can do pretty much anything for complex applications. So again, create a system that works for you and for your application. So after we have all of our test cases are documented, we know what we're testing manually, we know what needs to be automated, we know what's already automated. We need to figure out how to groom and prioritize all of the tech debt that we need to address, all of the test cases that need to be refactored, all of the new tests that need to be written. So grooming is an agile scrum concept, but it also applies to non-agile or hybrid teams. It basically boils down to clarifying the scope of tasks. So what does it involve? How much time do we think it's going to take? We can divide large projects into smaller, individually testable tasks. This is super important because if you put a ton of work into a large project, it's going to take a very long time for it to be tested. And then if you find an issue with it, that's an entire chunk of work that cannot be merged or promoted. So if you break it into small, individually testable tasks, you can find issues at a smaller level, which means you don't have to roll back as much. Identifying dependencies among tasks. You don't want to get to the point where you're unable to work on something because there are three other tasks that have to be done first. Estimating the amount of work. We don't want any one person to be overwhelmed. Prioritizing. What's the most important? What's going to get us the most bang for our buck? And then assigning tasks for the upcoming development cycle, sprint, whatever you want to call the chunk of work that comes next. Now, Scrum guidelines typically recommend about 15 to 20% of your total work allowance be allocated for tech debt. But again, that's can be applicable to non-agile and hybrid teams. And it also just depends on your individual organization and application. So these are the tasks that we are going to need to prioritize, neatly sorted for you. So we have our new test to be automated, which includes uncaught bugs, maybe our most common user flows we want to prioritize a little higher, the highest risk flows, anything high value, anything that's a risk to safety, security, or privacy. For example, I worked for an organization that was related to healthcare. So obviously, anything related to urgent care or emergency care, we wanted to make sure that that worked. So that was a very high priority test case. New features, something brand new that a lot of people are going to be interacting with. Any functionality that's going to be changing. And then anything else essential that isn't automated. Test framework, infrastructure, and DevOps tasks. These can actually add a lot of value and make your job a lot easier. Logging, reporting libraries, CI integration, helper libraries and APIs that maybe reduce the amount of code you have to write, adding or upgrading tooling, and then updating or creating your test documentation. And then, of course, everybody's favorite, refactoring. Flaky tests, updating any of your libraries and integrations, maybe dynamic generation of test data. So we kind of eliminate one of the sources of flaky tests by making our test data more dynamic. So how do we prioritize this? We want to do all the things. Where do we start? The first thing you can think of, I'm sure everyone's seen this before, is the test automation pyramid. I've worked for a lot of companies that wanted to automate everything through the UI. And as you can see from this pyramid, and as many of you probably know from experience, that takes a lot of time and a lot of effort. And UI automation tests tend to be the slowest. But we can make sure that the basic functionality of the code is covered by white box testing, such as unit tests. If you work with components, you can do component level testing. You can do your security testing and the contract tests. You can do integrations. And then you can do end-to-end API tests. That's a really good way of determining integrations with third-party APIs, making sure that you're returning the correct status code, error messages, your requests and response are functioning as they should. And then everything done through the UI should be from an end user perspective, and it should be the tests that test everything from an end user perspective. So think carefully about how you want to test certain things. And then one of my favorite tools is the impact and effort matrix. This is actually from Six Sigma, which is a quality control method org that businesses use to reduce defects and improve processes. I use this a lot for lots of things, not just my job. But it basically breaks things into how much effort versus how much impact. And just as an example, things like quick wins could be creating templates so that everything's consistent, metrics tracking. Major projects could be implementing that programmatic test data creation. Your low impact, low effort could be maybe automating edge cases. Oh, that should actually be flipped, excuse me. That's high effort. Automating edge cases with complex data setup. And then your thankless task is going to be cleaning up code and implementing standards. So if writing all of the new test cases, everybody knows UI automation takes a lot of code. There are tools out there such as Ranorex, which is a low code, no code solution that can speed up automating new functionality. It has click and recording steps, built-in test data handling, easy use of variables, integration with lots of common tools. So if creating new tests is one of your burdens, if you have a lot of things to automate, there are tools out there such as Ranorex that can make your job a lot easier. So now that we kind of have our practices established, let's talk about how our new systems are going to help us as we move through the development life cycle. We need to maintain our test case repository. So during development, we need to make sure that we update the status of our newly automated test cases from manual to automated. We're going to document any new test cases in our test case repository. A new bug comes in. We don't have a test for that yet. We create a new automated test ticket. And then creating new tickets for any newly identified tech debt. Maybe our payment system is being really buggy, or maybe we're using an address, a third-party service that looks up addresses and it's giving us trouble. Post-test run, we might need to reprioritize our tickets. Maybe some bugs were found, maybe some tech debt is blocking further automation. We'll create new tickets for cases that need to be updated or debugged, and then again, any newly identified tech debt. So constantly monitoring and constantly updating are how we keep ourselves from going underwater again. And then another thing that is really great, it's a great way to figure out where you need to allocate more resources and efforts, is by monitoring and tracking your key performance indicators. This is also a good way to demonstrate to technical leadership the effectiveness of your tooling and your processes. So some examples of indicators that you might want to track is the running total of manual test cases in the backlog. You can demonstrate, that as you automate, the amount of manual testing is going down. You can break it down by feature and team ownership. The percentage of your backlog automated. You can break that down further by your web tests, API, desktop, mobile testing. Percentage of your automated tests that passed, failed, or are blocked. You can do the same with your manual regression. The number of bugs found post-production. Ideally, if your tooling and processes are working, this number should go down. And then any other metrics that may be important to your organization. You may want to track your performance testing or load testing or user feedback, whatever you find important. But the more you're able to track it, you'll be able to see very clearly what areas you need to give a little more attention to, where some more troubleshooting might need to happen, and where you may need to allocate some more of your resources. Test reporting is another great way just to share progress with stakeholders. Test reports, they can be customized to include charts and graphs. That's really nice if you just want to click a quick glance for non-technical stakeholders, or if you just want to see an overall high-level view of how your test suite is doing. Screenshots, it's really nice when you can see a test failed to be able to see a screenshot, and then you're like, oh, that button we were supposed to click actually wasn't there. Console logs. If you have a lot of failing tests, being able to see that this third-party service was returning a 500 or maybe a 403. Test result data. I actually use this a lot. If you're testing in a lower environment and then you need to go into a higher environment, being able to track maybe an order ID and see, okay, this order ID, went through this process, but then it wasn't carried over to the database fully. And then any other data that's valued by your organization. This is also a really great tool for debugging and just being able to kind of see higher level issues that you might have. This is also, by the way, a report from TestRail, which again, used a lot as an automation engineer. And then just continuous improvement. What are some other things that we can do just to make our processes and procedures and tooling work for us instead of us fighting it? Some of the things I've gathered over my decade as an automation engineer that I found very helpful are, before development starts, start planning your new test cases. You can start gathering your requirements, align on your standards and goals. This is a good time for QA to start talking to developers about possible negative test case scenarios and what types of testing might need to happen, different user types, different payment types. Call out quality concerns. This is a great time to bring up the, well, what if the, you can start planning for and creating your test data early. You can start creating your test cases early during planning as the stories are being developed. And you could start planning for your automation. I actually liked to start getting my automation code, just the skeletons of it, in place during planning, just so I was able to hit the ground running as development progressed. During development, test every completed ticket. Track the passing and failing of which tickets are passing QA and which ones are failing QA. That's another metric that you can track. Take note of any tech debt or blockers during development. And then you can run subsets of tests as needed. If a developer finishes the ticket, QA can test the ticket can be merged, and then the development sandbox can be run against regression, just to make sure that before it even gets promoted, anything that breaks a previously working functionality, you can address it immediately during the development stage. And then after deployment, regression testing, automated regression and manual testing. If something isn't automated yet, but it's crucial to your application, you should manually test it after deployment. Align on what constitutes a showstopper. Oh, sorry, when I say deployment, I mean deployment to the pre-production. Align on what constitutes a showstopper. What is going to prevent this from going to prod versus what is just going to be, we're going to put a ticket in and we'll fix it later. And then take note of tests that need refactoring. So any false failures that you may have, things that look like a fail during regression, but they actually weren't. And then after testing, Reflect and refine. You can have a post-mortem or a retrospective. Review your progress on the KPIs. Share reports with any stakeholders as needed. Go ahead and make any new tickets that you need to do. And then discuss what went well and what could still be improved. So basically, to sum up all of the information I've thrown at you during the seminar, maintain your efforts. Once you get a good system going, make sure to keep your automation backlog up to date. Make sure you make time for that tech debt and stay on top of it. And then start your test planning as soon as possible. As you're going through the development life cycle, watch and track your KPIs. Trying to immediately troubleshoot underlying causes of bugs, especially if you're seeing the bug more than once. And make sure that your automation is doing what it's supposed to do. And then just keep communication open. Make sure that you have a system for assigning tests and test related tasks. Bug and tech debt reporting, I always make sure I have a point of contact. I know who owns everything and I know who I need to contact if I find a bug in that area. And then just sharing test reports. And that's all I have for you guys today. I'm going to turn it back over to Jesslyn. And if anybody has any Q&A, please let us know.
Yeah, no, we thank you so much, Devon. That was amazing. So we have a good question here we can go ahead and kick it off with. So Devon, what considerations should you think about for tooling to automate tests once you have a strategy to work on closing the automation gap? Low code or coded?
I would consider how much existing automation you have that's already working. If you have a lot that needs to be automated and you have little to nothing, or little to nothing that actually works, and it's crucial that you get automation completed as soon as possible, low code and no code can be extremely useful. It dramatically speeds up time to test. And if you have non-technical or less technical resources in your organization, they can very quickly add value and quickly add automated tests to your test repository. If you already have pretty robust automation framework, you have automation engineers, you already have a framework that's working really well, and most of your issues are just around some tech debt, some flaky tests, and catching back up with new features, then I would look to find tools that may extend the usefulness of your automation framework or take some of the pain points out of it. For example, Ranorex obviously has Ranorex Studio, which is a low code, no code solution, but there's also Ranorex Driver, which you can use with an existing Selenium project, Selenium Java, Selenium Python, and then you can do desktop automation using the functionality of Ranorex. So there's lots of helpful tools out there that can just make your existing code work better for you. Or again, if you have a lot of catching up to do, low code, no code could be a great way to go.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Devon. So can you also extrapolate a little bit on why it's important to use both test management and automation tools together, as you showed both in your slides?
So if you use test case management first, especially if it's a test case management tool that can integrate with your CI, you'll be able to see the results broken down by test case in your automation results. For example, using the tools here, you can create test cases in TestRail. Those can be connected with your CI functionality. They can be You can have test cases created in DesignWise that can be uploaded into TestRail, and then your automated results can be shown on a dashboard. TestRail also is integrated with Ranorex. One of the features I really liked about TestRail when I was an automation engineer is that I could I could run my manual tests in a test run in TestRail, and then after they were automated, I could still see that same test history from when it was a manual test all the way to when it was an automated test. I could see an unbroken history of it. And that's really helpful when you're able to go back to a test case and see the last time it passed. So if you have a test case that's suddenly failing, you can look back and say, oh, the last time that it passed was on this date. And the next day is when we, you know, switched over to a new database, or we implemented a new feature. So it's really good for traceability. And then just also having a very holistic view of what's automated and what isn't.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Devon. I see a ton coming into the Q&A now. This is great. Please keep putting your questions in here. We'll answer as many as we can. So we have one here in the Q&A from Narendra. What kind of applications does Ranorex support to automate? Can we build automation frameworks for large projects?
So Ranorex is capable of automating Windows desktop applications, web applications, native mobile in iOS and in Android. And it also is capable of doing image-based comparisons. So it basically has a visual regression capability built into it. You can also add timers, which is a way of monitoring how long things are taking to load. Um, so pretty much the only thing Ranorex is not capable of doing is if you have Mac OS desktop applications. Um, yeah, that's pretty much it. Ranorex has a lot of very powerful functionality. You can use the low code, no code features, but it also gives you the ability to go into the code and add your own user code. You can customize the selectors that you're using, and you can organize your project in a way that makes sense to you. That's one of the things I really loved about Ranorex, coming from the automation engineer background, is I am a technical user. But Ranorex gives me the ability to speed up all of those time consuming, creating page object files, creating .click methods, trying to find the perfect selector, dealing with shadow DOMs and iframes. I can just quickly click and record all of the things that are really tedious and time consuming, but I can still go into the code myself and customize it for my own use cases and for my application.
Awesome. Thank you so much. We got another one here from an anonymous attendee. Devon, how do you manage time between getting sprint stories tested and adding automated tests when you don't have an automation framework and are trying to start automation from scratch without a dedicated automation engineer?
That's one of those times when a low code, no code would be really helpful. I can tell you that even as an automation engineer, starting a framework from scratch, which I've done for several of my positions, it takes time. The more code you write, the less code you have to add, but you still have to interview an automation engineer. You have to hire them, you have to onboard them. They have to get to know the application well enough to decide what kind of a design pattern, excuse me, a design pattern they want to use. They have to define all the selectors. They have to create the framework. It has to be integrated with all of the things. Um, it can be very difficult. In one of those situations, I would use a no code, low code solution if I could. If that wasn't something that I could do, I would go for, again, the things that would be the highest impact, lowest effort first. And then I would probably use my KPIs to go to technical management and demonstrate my need for further resources.
Awesome. Thank you so much. We got another great one from an anonymous attendee here. They say, I work as a QA at a startup where velocity is the priority. I'm finding it really difficult to maintain and grow our UI automation, Cypress, with the product changing so quickly. Do you have any tips on how to prioritize or manage my time better?
One of the things I would definitely do that helped me a lot, I've been in similar situations, is literally start planning your automation when the developers start planning their features, as early as you can, while the stories are being created, or whatever unit of work you're using if you're not agile. I would start creating the test case scenarios. If you're using a coded solution, if you're writing your own automation code, go in and start writing your methods as soon as you can. The only thing you're going to need are the selectors, but if you're in on the planning sessions, you'll see what the functionality is going to be. You can probably see designs of what the UI is going to look like. So then you can start writing your test cases, and then all you'll need to do is plug in your selectors and then do some debugging. I did that frequently. I also aligned with the developers on what our selector strategy was going to be. Accessibility attributes are great because everybody wants their app to be accessible. Those are usually kept up to date because they're accessibility features and they're great selectors to use for automation. So if I know what my selectors are going to be ahead of time because we've aligned on a naming strategy, I can write my test as the developers are doing their development. And I find that's really helpful because at the beginning of a sprint, a QA may not have a lot to do until a developer is finished with the tests or finished with a ticket for you to test. So you can get a lot of that done in the early stages of a sprint and then as something is being developed. I would also keep track of those key performance indicators. If you can say, this is what needs to be automated that isn't. This is how much time I spent manually testing. This is how much time I had to automate. And, bring up any of the technical debt that's blocking you. If you've got data, you can back up your request for resources, troubleshooting, or tooling.
Awesome. Thank you so much. We got another one from Narendra here in the Q&A. How much support is available for mobile testing?
We have everyone that is a Ranorex subscriber, you have access to tons of support. We have extensive documentation. We have, and I don't know if this is the exact question that you're asking, we have extensive documentation and you have access to support resources on the Ranorex side that can do screen shares with you. They can answer questions for you. Um, Usually as part of our sales demo process, you'll have someone walk through creating an application. I've gotten to sit in on some really wonderful client onboarding sessions where the individual use case is discussed and the client is walked through getting their application set up. So I'd say it's the customer service is really fantastic. I know since I've started, a lot of the support engineers and success engineers have helped me a lot with the questions that I've had about it.
Great. Thanks so much. We have one here from Joel. We do entirely manual testing at the moment. We would like to start using automation and are looking into different automation tools. Are there any features of Ranorex that set it apart from its peers?
One of the things I love the most about Ranorex is if you use it for manual testing, you can record those steps. And then you can customize them. So if you have people that are technical that want to go in and edit the selector, add individual user code, you can do that. But all of the framework setup is done for you. You can do click and record, or you can go in and use invoke actions to make it more Selenium based. Um, you can also do so in a Windows desktop application or a mobile application. When I was an automation engineer, we would have one framework for iOS, we would have a separate framework for Android, and then we would have another framework for UI. So we had to maintain three repositories, and they were in three different programming languages. And that was extremely difficult. So having all of the things available to both manually test and to record those steps and use them as automated tests, I think that's a huge win because I still have a little bit of yeah, I remember having to context switch constantly between three different automation repos. So
Great. Thanks so much, Joel and Devon. We have another one here from anonymous attendee. This is an interesting one. This might put you on the spot a little bit, Devon. But uh, can you imagine a way to use Ranorex, perhaps by using a special sort of test for producing some kind of user documentation? So the idea is to run a special test that will produce a special report. Presumably, that report is then the user documentation. Sorry if I did not translate that well there, anonymous attendee. But yeah, any idea for how to use Ranorex to help with that?
yeah, I know with Ranorex reporting. So one of the things, Ranorex has 50 different technologies integrated in it. So there are probably libraries integrated with Ranorex I'm not even aware of yet because I haven't gotten that far. But also, every time a step is recorded or every time you add an action, you have the opportunity to add a note. Basically, you can add your own logging. You can set your own logging level. So you can add whatever documentation you want as you're recording or adding the action steps. Um, I actually had that same thought about how I would create uh, sort of a more readable Java doc situation. And what I think is really exciting about it is you can actually do so at the test level. So you can do a test run and you can have all that documentation printed as part of your test report. But I'm actually going to take note of that. I think that's really interesting. I'm going to specifically to dig into some of the options that we may have for that. So thank you for giving me another avenue to explore. I appreciate that.
Yeah, thank you so much. That is an interesting one. We'll definitely dig into
Yeah,
it and keep an eye
that's
on
really
social
cool.
media. If we turn up anything cool, we'll write a blog post or something about it.
Yeah, I love that.
Um, yeah, no, I like that too. Uh, awesome. So on to the next one. We have Jonathan here asking, are you able to use Ranorex to run tests on multiple machines?
Okay, so this is one that, yes, I am not a DevOps person. Most of the positions that I've been in, DevOps has been handled by uh, other machines, Selenium Grid, situations like that have been handled by the DevOps department. So I don't want to accidentally say the wrong thing. But Ranorex does not live in the cloud. Ranorex is something that lives on your machine, the machine that has the Ranorex instance on it. That's another thing that is, I think, kind of attractive to me because there have been a lot of news stories recently about security issues, hacking, data privacy has been really big. Um, I can tell you that there is, if you go to uh, ranorex.com, or I think it's help.ranorex.com. We have extensive documentation on different options for running Ranorex on certain machines. And if anybody, Chris, if you know the answer to that, again, I just
Yeah.
don't want to do the wrong thing.
Oh, I just had Chris over here in the chat wanting me to mention the Ranorex Jenkins integration, which I'm going to
Yes.
put a link to this in the chat here for everybody to see as well as in response to Jonathan. So I don't know, Chris, if you wanted to expand on that a little bit.
Yep. Hi, Rudy. Yeah, I'll just add to what Devon said. No, it's definitely accurate. We do offer integrations, DevOps and CI integrations for Ranorex. We have an article for Jenkins as being one of them. So, if you're looking to do execution of Ranorex on a separate machine or executing in a pipeline, you can check out the article as an example for Jenkins-based execution of Ranorex. In addition to device farm and like multi-browser support. So that's definitely on there. Feel free to take a look. Good questions, everybody.
Mhm.
Right. Thanks, Chris. And Chris here is solution architect for TestRail, so like, he just kind of popped out of nowhere. But we got TestRail in the house here too. Lots of experts here today. Um, so great, thank you, Chris. Thank you, Devon. Moving on to a question here from Abdiel. Hello, I have a question regarding the integration of TestRail and Ranorex. Is there a recommended or optimal number of test cases to execute in an automated suite with Ranorex, especially when triggered from TestRail? For example, is there a threshold in terms of performance or stability when running large sets of test cases?
Hmm. Chris,
Yeah,
thoughts?
Chris, maybe.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I mean, I can answer this. I mean, and generally, so if we're talking about scalability, right? So Ranorex and TestRail, so it sounds like you're talking about maybe both, but I mean, both products are enterprise level products. We have these at some of the largest. I mean, I can't name some company specifically, but you can look at some of our logos that not run 5 or 10 or hundreds, but thousands of tests. So, these are enterprise products. Whether you're running just Ranorex and Ranorex suites and large scale executions, or you're integrating with TestRail or running or using TestRail standalone. These are absolutely enterprise applications, and they can scale to whatever your business needs are.
A lot of it also probably depends on if you have your test cases organized into separate suites that you're running subsets, like if you're running, smoke tests or the full regression or, you know, the way you configure your CI would play into that as well. But yeah, there's no like in like there's no limitation as far as the technology goes.
Great. Thanks, experts. Chris, while you're here, I'm going to grab you to answer a bit of a test rail question we have from anonymous attendee. Can test rail generate test cases automatically according to function description or specifications? Thank you.
Yeah, no, this is a really great question. We got a lot of this right now. So Testro in its current state, right? We just released our 9.0 version. We have another release coming up. So I will just say I won't get into a lot of details, but Testrail is looking at various AI functionality and has active beta user programs happening currently, which will support related functionality. I will definitely say if you're interested in this, and I think Jeslyn can probably put a link here in a moment or two. I would say go and request a trial for Testrail if you're not already using it. And then that's an area where we can you can get engaged to look at some of that functionality that you're interested in. So, well, I think we'll put a link on how to get a trial. It's a self-service
Mhm.
trial. So.
Yeah, I can put a link to the test rail trial in here, and I know that we're showing this resources slide that is not clickable, which somebody pointed out earlier. We will be sending a recording of today's session and the Q&A as well as the slides, so you will be able to click all of these links around to everybody in about 24 hours, but I will also do my best here while Chris and Devon are talking to put all of these links in the chat as well, starting with the test rail trial, which I am putting in the chat right now. And I believe that also kind of took out two questions with one stone here, because we did have a question about plans to integrate AI with future versions of Ranorex. Just stay tuned to the whole SEMBI portfolio. We have some big things coming up very soon. We plan to start rolling out the first of our AI-driven tools here. In maybe about a month or two. Still firming up the dates and deadlines there, but please keep an eye on our social media, sign up for our email newsletters for TestRail, Ranorex, all the design-wise, all the products in the SMB umbrella if you haven't already, and you will be the first to know when we start rolling out AI, because it is definitely in the works. So the link to the test rail trial just went in the chat. I will try to get all the rest of these links in here, especially for the free trials here as we're spending our last few minutes answering questions. So with that, I will move on to the next one here from Vinod. Hello, what are the best practices for storing test data in Ranorex? Should I use internal data tables or integrate with Excel? And which method is recommended for better maintainability and scalability?
That would depend on the complexity, I'd say, of your test data. You can create data tables where you just have hard-coded data. You can pull in test data via CSV file. Um, I've worked for companies where we've had internal endpoints running that generate test data that send it to a CSV, which is then uploaded to our application. Um, yeah, that's one of those things that would kind of depend on the complexity and if you have test data that needs to be like generated programmatically, or if you're, fine with set test data. As far as recommendations, that would probably be for anything large. I think maintaining, like uploading a CSV would probably be the most logical, just so that you're not manually clicking in into the database within Ranorex. Because again, the whole point is low code, no code. We want it to be as efficient as possible. So that's probably going to be the most efficient way. But we really do individualize on a case by case basis with Ranorex. You really do have an expert that is working with you for the unique needs of your application. Because even if you have the exact same tech stack as another company, everyone uses their tech stack completely differently and has different requirements. So
Great. Thank you so much, Devon. Um, Sharon here says you mentioned an image compare feature in Ranorex. Can you elaborate on how that works, and maybe do you have an example to show?
oh, I wish I had an example to show. Yeah, it's really neat actually. So when you go to record in Ranorex, you can click record. Your application will come up. As you mouse over, each element that you pass over will be highlighted in like a red box. And when you click on it, as you're recording, you'll have the option to do an image-based comparison, or you'll have the option of just recording the steps, which takes note of the selector. Um, the image-based functionality is you can create your base image and then you can do tests, and it'll basically just do similar to what like a Percy solution would do. It'll just compare the new image when the test runs. It'll take a new image compared to the one that's saved, and you can update that saved image. So if your UI changes, you can say, this is going to be the new image, and then all subsequent tests will be compared against that image. One thing I love about that is when I used to implement Percy into a test framework, I literally every single view that I wanted screenshotted, I would have to put a line of code saying to take a screenshot. And then when I would get the results, I had to organize them myself by like doing naming and putting them in a certain order just to kind of keep a flow in mind. My last company, one test had 75 different UI screens, which was a nightmare and it took forever. So just the fact that you can do it with a click in Ranorex, I think is awesome. And it's something that I'm planning on doing a project based on that very thing. So I'll probably do a blog post on my discoveries. So
Great. Thank you so much, Devon. And I know we're getting close to the top of the hour here, so let's find maybe one more good question here to answer. Um, Chris is volunteering to take this question from Glenn. What do you recommend for setting up TestRail test case templates?
Yeah, this is a really great question, Glenn. And I just saw you put this in here. And it relates to Devon's content, which is really everybody has a lot of great questions today, which is awesome. You can customize these templates specifically to align with activities like automation backlog or automating then manual cases, or if you have a specific type of manual test case that you want to automate, whether it's stepwise or more BDD focused. So my general recommendation would be look and leverage and understand the templates that we offer out of the box for TestRail, and then you can look at customizing each of the templates, adding test case customizations and fields, aligning it with initiatives like closing the automation gap, which is what we're talking about today, and how to track, manage, maybe do some prioritization from manual test to then leverage for automation. So understand what we have. We have a lot of features, and then you can customize a lot of these areas to meet whatever needs that you like. But really good question.
Great. Thanks so much, Chris. With that, we are nearing the top of the hour. I know y'all probably have some meetings to hop to, so I'll make sure and let you go in time to do that. But thank you so much for joining us this Thursday. Thank you so much, Devon. Incredible job, some really great content here. Thank you so much for everybody who contributed to the Q&A. We had a great time answering your questions. As I said, in about 24 hours, keep an eye on your inbox for a recording of today's session and Q&A, as well as a copy of the slides, so you'll be able to review the content and click on all these links. I did put all these links here in the chat if you wanted to check out a free trial of TestRail Ranorex design-wise, or an instant on-demand demo for any of them. Do also have links here to the support and documentation center for all of these products, as well as the TestRail Academy, which is a fun free resource that we have that covers not only best practices in TestRail, but all kinds of great industry best practices and deep dives. You can earn some fun little LinkedIn ready certifications at the end. It's free for everybody, not just TestRail customers, so we encourage everyone to check it out for some good continuous learning and development in QA. But with that, thank you so much again for everybody for attending today. Really great crowd. So happy to see everyone. Keep an eye on your inbox for our follow-up in about 24 hours. And we're excited to see you at the next one. Take care. Have a great rest of your week.